friends. Welcome back to the Wall Street Skinny. I'm Jen.
I'm Kristen.
And we are reunited. So we were missing Kristen last week. She was sick with the flu. So we're so happy to have her back. Today we're going to talk sports investing 101. This, to me, I mean, second to none, is the coolest theme of 2025. We're going to break it all down for you. But before we get into it, we have a ton to catch up on because, like I said, not only was Kristen not here, but Kristen has a little announcement for everyone.
So I've been so sick recently. It's funny. I was listening back because we've been re-airing our industry podcast, and I'm like, I'm sick. I've been sick because I've also been pregnant. So having our fourth kid, and it's a cool thing to have kids, but the pregnancy part is not the most fun. So having the flu on top of being pregnant where you can't take anything, like that's the hardest thing. So when we were at iConnections, I sent Jen out because I literally started to come down with the flu. And she was a saint and went and picked up some medicine for me. And she's like, all right, can you do Tylenol, colds, and flu? Can you do da-da-da-da-da? Can you do Dayquil? And I was like, no, I can do Tylenol and that's it. So, but no, it's really exciting. And yeah.
What's different about this pregnancy than your other ones?
It's a bazillion times harder, maybe because I'm old, but also
what else?
So I have 3 girls and we're having a boy. So it's, I'm joining Jen in the boy mom camp. So it'll be,
welcome.
Will actually be a perfect split, Jen, because you have 2 boys. I'll have 1. So it'll be 3 boys and we'll have 3 girls. It's going to be a perfect 50-50.
Perfect. Love
and for the record, it's so funny because some people like actually think that we're together. We are not. We are business partners and friends.
We say we have 5 kids together currently, or we're going to have 6 kids together. It sounds like
we are not. But between the 2 of us, in this joint venture, the company, there are 6 kids.
The business family.
Exactly.
One of our sweet followers today was like, so what's the maternity leave policy like when you're a business owner? I was like, listen, I've been a business owner through both of my pregnancies and births. The reality is when you're an entrepreneur and a business owner, there is no maternity leave.
No, because it's eat what you kill. Like if it work.
I will say this. I do think that something I'm so grateful for that we have built that I didn't have in my previous business is we have kind of the gracious give and take. Yesterday, I was barely functioning because my oldest was sick. He has norovirus. So I'm sitting there. He vomited on my shoes. Like it's just a disaster. And Kristen was like, I got you. You know what I'm saying? And it's not like I didn't work. I just did the work that didn't require me being on camera. You know what I'm saying? So there's always ways you can contribute to the business when you're not necessarily like on the front lines. Obviously, I don't expect you to be like me and like recording a podcast from the delivery
I probably
room,
will,
like
though.
I was writing an offer in real estate. But like, you know, it's the beautiful thing about working for yourself. And that's why when people talk about like, oh, I want to stop work. You really want to work for yourself and be able to have that freedom to pursue these things that you're passionate about on your own time.
Well, even with my third, if I taught, I got paid. If I didn't teach, I didn't get paid. So I ended up like just going back and working at 6 weeks postpartum because it was like, if I don't work, I don't get paid. So it's like, I'm going to just work. And I do think, to your point, the beauty of having your own business is it's on your own time. It's flexible. You can do as much as you need to do to get done. But then also because of the fact that we're social media based, a lot of the stuff you can do, like if you're nursing, like you can like work on your computer while you're doing it. I mean, I get bored really easily. And I remember when I was on maternity leave with my first, I was like bored out of my mind and I love her so much. But like, again, kids when they're a newborn, they don't really do much. It's not like you're going to like take your kids out for a fun act. You know what I mean? It's like, they just kind of lie there and like, that's all they do. So it is kind of nice to be able to use your brain in other ways if you're also like stuck at home, not being able to do much. But it's so funny. I'm like very much a person that like believes in signs, and we weren't sure if we were going to have another kid, but it was so funny when we were at the CASE conference in LA. Jen was like, I think you're pregnant. And I was like, I'm definitely not, as I'm like chugging martinis. But
I had a dream.
Oh, that was what it was.
I had an incredibly vivid dream the second night of the conference that you were pregnant, to the point that I like, it was the first thing I said to you the next morning. Do you remember this? I mean, it was beyond vivid. And you were like, Well, dream
You're like, nah.
on, you know?
Yeah. But it actually turns out it was. But I think it's one of these things where it's like someone says, think about a red car, so you see them everywhere. But like, I kept noticing that all these really high powered women who we were interviewing, like Avery Sheffield or Michelle from Zinnia, like they all had 4 kids. Or we were talking to Matt at the case conference and he was like, I have 4 kids. And actually it was funny because then in the conversation we had with Eli Manning when we were at iConnections, it was this really great conversation. We're going to air it a little bit later in this episode, but he was saying how he has 3 girls. And then we stopped recording. He was asking us about our kids. And I was like, oh, I have 3 girls too. And he's like, oh yeah, I have 3 girls. And then I have a youngest son. And I was like, oh my God, you know? So it was just, anyway, like you start seeing these things everywhere. And as I've said before, I don't know how much of it is just your brain then focuses in on details that are then relevant to your life, or it's the universe giving signs. I like the logical part of my brain says it's the former, but like the spiritual part says it's the latter. So
who knows? But it's so exciting. And I'm so excited for you. And I'm so glad that we are finally able to share that with you guys. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to get into today. So kind of the genesis of this conversation actually started at the CASE conference. There was a panel there about sports investing with Todd Bowley, who is one of the owners of Chelsea Football Club and also launched the deal that formed Sportsnet LA. So like it kind of got on our radar then. I was lucky enough to sit next to one of the writers for Sports Business magazine. So the seed was planted, and I think there were some structural changes, which we'll get into, that were at the heart of why this has picked up so much steam. But then we've had a number of conversations, whether it be with former athletes turned investors like Eli Manning, whether it be with investors like David Adelman, who we got to speak to. We'll also be airing that conversation today as well in its entirety, who's one of the co-owners of the 76ers and the New Jersey Devils. It's very clear that sports teams in various capacities are the hot area for investment these days for both kind of like the LPs, the family offices and things like that at the micro level, and also at the big institutional level with some of the big private capital investors. So that's something we're going to unpack a little bit today. We're going to talk about the mechanics of how it all works and break that down for you guys so that you can understand it a little bit better than what I always classically thought of. It was like, oh, it's just some billionaire who owns a sports team, or like, oh, it's some too soon fail bank or crypto firm that has their name on a stadium. Like there's way more to it than that.
Yeah. And then we also sat down with someone who like literally walked us through how this works. And so at some point we might be able to reveal who this mystery person is, but they gave us like the best lesson in sports investing like I've ever heard. So we're going to take some of those key summaries and share with you some of the things that we learned. But, you know, it's really interesting because like you hear people talk about, oh, like XYZ, you know, Mark Cuban owns a sports team, Stephen Cohen owns a sports team. And for me, like it didn't really, not that it didn't mean much. Like obviously I follow sports-ish. I mean, as any American, I feel like does, you tend to follow whether it's baseball, basketball, or football. By the way, American football, since I know we have international listeners. But I never really appreciated just the vast difference in how the various teams make money. And so 3 major teams, NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball or MLB. So I want to start with just like the NFL because the Super Bowl is this weekend, which is one of the things that sparked us wanting to have this conversation to begin with. And I have to say, go Birds. My husband is a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan. But the NFL is basically one of the best run sports leagues out there, period, full stop. So if an investor buys in, let me just quickly go through just the mechanics of how the cash flows work, because as a banker, you know, I tend to think about like, okay, you're buying into this team, what do you get? Whether it's, again, Philadelphia Eagles, whether it's the Patriots, a huge chunk of what you're getting is the portion of like NFL income, the national level. So the NFL has these huge TV contracts with the networks. So the NFL signed a $110 billion deal over 11 years. And that basically is then split up evenly amongst like the 32 teams. So that works out. If you buy into a team, you're getting something like $400 million a year from that TV deal. And so that's on like the revenue side. And then on the expenses side, there's this hard and fast salary cap of say like $250 million. You cannot pay more than that in salaries for your players. So it doesn't take like a genius to make money at the NFL level. But this is why you have teams, whether it's like you own the Giants based in New York City or you own the Kansas City Chiefs, and the valuation of those teams is roughly the same. Because the way that, again, from a valuation standpoint, it works, 80% of what you're getting is from that national level and only 20% is local. So it makes it actually really easy for like those rain bankers or whoever's doing the valuation to like figure out what the teams are worth to like run the comps. But that's going to be a really important point because as you think about, I know, Jen, you're in Charlotte and you were saying that, it's like, it's not like the stadiums are super packed. But again, if you own what are the Charlotte team? Panthers?
So we have the Carolina Panthers. Yeah, they're not a
Carolina Panthers. But the point is, like, if you own the Carolina Panthers, even if you're not filling up the stadium, you're still getting such a giant chunk of those cash flows from the national level that, like, that almost doesn't matter that much. Again, it does matter a little bit, but it's not going to be the huge thing that makes or breaks everything. But the thing is that just there's been a huge conversation recently about who can buy into these teams. So, Jen, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about, like, some of the laws that have changed to enable different people to buy in.
Well, yeah. So historically, there's been different ways to invest. So it's historically been much, much, much easier to buy, say, a baseball team or a hockey team. There's, I believe, one historically publicly traded NFL team, and that's the Green Bay Packers. They've issued actually like shares of stock that you can buy into. But unless you were a super billionaire like David Tepper, who bought the Carolina Panthers outright, right? Just with his cash, basically, that was really not accessible. However, there's been recent changes that now allow a certain group of whitelisted private equity firms to invest in NFL teams. And so that's really shaking things up because now you've got Arctos, you've got Ares, Sixth Street, and a consortium group, including Blackstone, Carlyle, a couple of other names, who can all start investing in the NFL. What does this mean, though, if you are, say, a small family office or someone like that who maybe can't buy into one of these funds but wants exposure? Well, now all of them are saying they're watching what's happening at the NFL level and saying, I want a piece of that kind of action. So much investment is now happening, too, at like the micro sports level. People are buying things that previously weren't seen as these like gangbusters investments to get their hands on anything. And we obviously have like the old storied investors. We referenced Todd Boehly earlier, but like the owners of Liverpool and Chelsea. And, these are like classically trophy investments. So now everyone wants a piece of the action, is trying to get in on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm just going to back up for 1 second because I think it's really important to just hammer home the thing that makes the NFL so unique, which is you have, again, the majority of the revenues coming from that national level. And then on the expenses side, there is that hard cap. So I used to actually always find it hilarious that like Tom Brady made less than Giselle. Like Tom Brady, because Jen and I, we are obviously from the Boston area. And so it was really fun to be a Patriots fan when they won all the time. But like he didn't earn, I thought like as much as you would think someone of his capacity would because of those hard caps. Because if you think about it, like even just on a player basis, like you want your team to win. There's only so much money to go around. So you're not going to want to, he's not going to want to take all the money because then there's nothing else to like pay for the rest of the team. And he wants to get the best players. So it does kind of create, I think, a good teamwork mentality. And you did hear about he would accept less so that they could get better players on the team.
Yeah.
But so the point though is that there's this hard and fast cap at the NFL. Now, next up, I want to talk about the NBA. And so this is kind of like more in the middle. We're going to see the two extremes are the NFL on one end and then Major League Baseball on the other. But so the NBA, in this case, you have basically 60% of the revenues coming from that sort of national level. So the NFL, we said, signed like a $100 billion contract for 11 years. The NBA is closer to like 77. And so that means that, again, 60% of the revenues is coming from that national deal, 40% is local. And so this became actually kind of interesting in the conversation we had with David Adelman because he's a part owner of the 76ers, right? So the Sixers based in the NBA team for Philadelphia. And so we're going to talk about how he's making this huge investment in a local arena because again, like the team and then that local arena kind of go hand in hand. But what's interesting here is that there's not hard caps on the expenses side. So again, you think about like revenues, then you think about expenses. There's not a hard cap on the expenses side the way there is in the NFL. There's sort of more like these soft salary caps. And so this actually is like a little more complicated. And I was talking to my husband. I was like, have you heard of this thing called like the first apron, second apron? He's like, no, what the heck is that? So the basic idea is that there is that cap that's referred to basically as the luxury tax. And so that is the threshold over which they don't want you to spend more on salaries. So to use some generic, nice round numbers, pretend $150 million, that's that recommended spending limit if you own an NBA team. Now, They added some more restrictive thresholds. And so they then had these additional lines that come over that luxury tax. So if the luxury tax is, call it 150 million, there's then this line called the first apron, where there's more restrictive financial penalties as well as some additional restrictions if you go over, say, like 155 million. So that gets you into what's called that first apron. That's that, again, that first threshold. You start to have some restrictive penalties. There's then a second threshold that gets even more restrictive. And so that's called the second apron. So again, let's just back up. 150 million, sort of the recommended spending limit. 155 million, first apron. 175 million, second apron. If you go above this, you really start to get financially screwed because the penalties aren't anything like, 10% here, 20% there. No. It's 420% or 4.2 times. So again, just as an example, right? Pretend the second apron starts at 175, but you want to hire another player and you want to pay him enough so that the all-in salaries go to, say, 185 million, which puts you at $10 million over that second apron. That would mean that additional $10 million you're over, you'd be hit with a 4.2 times penalty, which means you would then have to pay an extra $42 million in fines. So the point is that it's this huge disincentive to not go over that. And Jen, I know you had looked into the actual numbers, so I was just trying to use some generic, nice round numbers, but I know if you have some of the data on actually like what the numbers were for the last season.
Well, yeah. So I think for the 2024-2025 year, first apron is triggered at 178.1 million and second apron at 188.9 million.
And then that brings us to like the final sports league, which we're just going to talk about, which is like Major League Baseball. And so with baseball, it's almost like the inverse of the NFL. And so here, 80% of the cash flows are at the local level. And so back to kind of what we talked about on the national level, where NFL was 110 billion over 11 years, NBA was 77 billion over 10 years. Major League Baseball is about $10 billion over that same time period. So significantly less. I think about 25 years ago, they wanted to do more regional contracts. But regardless, the main takeaway is that means that 80% of the revenues that are earned are actually local. And this is why, if again, you have the NFL teams and you have like the Giants and the Chiefs both worth $8 billion, that is not the case for Major League Baseball. So much of the valuation and the value of those businesses is based on where they're actually located. And there's also no real hard, fast salary caps. And so this is why you see some of these crazy numbers like December 2024, Juan Soto signed a $765 million 15-year contract with the New York Mets. Now, if you think about the incentives, that makes sense, right? They need to fill the seats. They want to get the best players. Obviously, like it's a huge thing to win. Oh, and by the way, who is the owner? It's freaking former SAC turned .72 hedge fund billionaire Steve Cohen, who purchased a 95% stake in the team for $2.4 billion back in 2020. So the problem with the Major League Baseball is you have maybe like 6 of the 30 teams that are really earning a significant amount of money, but the remainder, it's this like haves versus have-nots thing. And so it goes back to just the NFL being this incredibly well-run enterprise where the incentives all line up. So then as like, as a national league, like you want to have really competitive teams and you want to have it be this like, again, national thing, whereas it's very much individualistic in Major League Baseball.
And you see that too in the way that teams are incentivized to shake things up. If you're losing, you're incentivized to lose big so that you can get a higher draft pick placement for the draft the following year. And it's funny because my husband is a huge sports fan and I don't listen to him speak about this stuff as much as I should because he's actually like very, very, very insightful. The man like wakes up, in the middle of the night and will like listen to sports podcasts to fall back asleep. But I think it's interesting that when our kids always ask, well, which team are you rooting for? Who do you want to see win? And he's like, I just want to see a good game. Right. And I think the NFL has really tapped into that, trying to keep there from being just these ruling dynasties. Sadly, unfortunately, my husband was branded a Jets fan at birth. And while there may not be ruling dynasties in the NFL, the Jets always seem to be a losing dynasty.
There's bad luck. Yeah.
But that's one of the things too. And I live here in Charlotte. When I was talking about empty stadia, I actually wasn't talking about the Panthers stadium. I was talking about the Hornets, the NBA team. So that's a very different story. Now, the Panthers are an interesting team to watch because Charlotte is fundamentally a transplant city, right? Our city has exploded in the last 10 years with so many people moving from other places. So we decided like, hey, listen, we're going to go all in as Panthers fans when we moved here. And like, that was part of our integration into the city. We lived in an apartment building with so many of the players. Like, I've got some crazy Kelvin Benjamin and Luke Kuechly stories from back in the day. But the point is that you look around the stadium and sometimes you'll be like, who's the home team? Because you'll see so many people with jerseys from the other teams. But I think it's kind of this cool thing that like the NFL has become this not hyper local thing, that like you living in Charlotte will be just as fine watching Red Zone and watching all the different teams play throughout the day. Whereas like it's very unlikely, or much less likely, I'd say, and sometimes impossible because of these contracts. You can't just like go watch a random baseball game, right? It may not even be playing where you are. Same thing with the NBA. So like, it's just really interesting to see that all play out.
It reminds me of when you were talking about rooting for whatever team. It reminds me so much of the old Seinfeld episode where he's like, I don't really understand like having a sports team. He's like, you're rooting for laundry. It's like the players get traded all the time, so like you're basically rooting for the person that puts on the shirt that like has your team. But it does like move around all the time.
So with all that being said, we're going to air 2 interviews now that we had the chance to record when we were at Global Alt. So the first is with Eli Manning, who is an investor in his own right. And this is something that I think is also critical to understand in the world of sports investing, that you have these professional athletes, whether it be A-Rod, Shaq, Eli Manning, Tom Brady, so many of these athletes who maybe their original source of wealth was their athletic career. They have become legitimate institutional investors in their own right and are becoming big players in the space. So we're going to talk to Eli about his latest venture and what's going on there. And then we're going to have a conversation with David Adelman. David Adelman, he's also agreed to do a full episode with us. So we're really excited to record that. So I won't spoil it with his full story. But I mean, kind of the apocryphal tale with him is that he is the son of Holocaust survivors who literally invested the $2,000 of his bar mitzvah money into campus apartments, which is the commercial real estate development that he has in Philly, servicing like the UPenn campuses. And spoiler alert, he's now worth about $2 billion and is part owner of, like we said, the Philadelphia 76ers, the New Jersey Devils. He's a founder. He also, I think, has a new tequila brand, and he is developing kind of a landmark high-end arena in Philadelphia to service the teams there. So we're going to talk about the infrastructure element of that and commercial real estate as well as that pertains to sports investing. So 2 super interesting conversations. We're just going to air them back to back after this. And we hope you guys enjoy. Okay, cool. So this is like an insane moment, and we're so excited to be joined here by Eli Manning. So Eli, many of you will know him as one of the world's most famous athletes, but also as an investor and a thought leader in the finance world. So tell us about Brand Velocity Group and what you're doing and what you're most excited about.
Well, looking at the business side of sports, and obviously there's a lot of talk about private equity getting involved in the NFL and a lot of these sports teams, but there's a lot of other opportunities to get involved in sports and not having to buy a franchise.
Yes,
a lot of the adjacencies around the game of sports, whether that's youth sports, whether that's in the content, on the media, whether that's in the equipment or collectibles or gaming. There's so many opportunities, and that's the areas that we're looking at. And with the kind of the changing landscape around professional sports and private equity getting involved, we think there'll be a lot of things coming downstream for us to get involved in, and excited for that opportunity.
Are you mostly involved in the NFL?
Anything involved in sports. So I'm personally involved in Gotham FC, which is the women's team there in New York, New Jersey, and excited about that. I have 3 daughters that are all involved in sports and playing in it. It's so cool for them to have role models, to get to see women's sports on TV, go to live events, seeing them active and what they're up to. And so I think just growing the game, the impact that sports has on our community, on our children, on the kids, the life lessons you learn through sports is so important. And that's how I grew up. And I was playing basketball, baseball, football. I grew up playing soccer, volleyball, whatever is out there. You get involved, you learn about it, and you make great friends, you great life lessons. And so if we can make an impact on our community, get involved in sports in any way, grow the game, give people opportunities to find their passion, that's what we're all about.
I love that. Okay, one quick question for you. So we are both moms of young children.
Yes.
And I feel like there's so much pressure these days for kids to specialize.
Yeah.
Basically from infancy.
Right.
Kristen was telling me a story the other day about how one of her friends was like, well, my kid is 6. They missed the opportunity to play hockey. It's over.
It's over.
And you were just talking about how you played any sport you could,
Right.
right? And you basically were a jack of all trades and then became master of one, which is amazing.
Right.
So I'm curious, like, what do you think that you as a leader in the sports world, like if you could give a message to parents of young kids today?
It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard on the kids. It's not fair to them that they have to make a decision when they're 9 years old.
Yeah.
What sport do I want to play?
Yeah.
And if this is my opportunity to make it to the right college, and the pressure is being put on them by coaches, by parents. And then from the parents' side, you're like, all right, I want my kids to play many sports and I want them to just be happy in whatever season. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, this other parents, they're doing travel and they're doing this league.
Yes.
And so you're like, oh, am I not giving my kid all the opportunities to be
Yes.
great and special? And
Right.
so you're getting pulled in a lot of different directions. And it's kind of easy for me to say, no, you got to just play different sports. But I fall into the trap of like, well, she likes this sport. Maybe we got to put her to this travel, but she still wants to swim and she still wants to play hockey and she's trying this. So ultimately, you got to kind of know your kid. What are they like? What are their
Yeah.
passion? What can they handle?
Yeah.
What do you think they're going to do? And it's kind of that you always want to push them to do the things they not necessarily want to do, so they can become the person or the player or the athlete they want to be, and just trying to make sure they're happy. Once they are overwhelmed or not doing, that's my biggest concern. I want my kids to play sports, but I don't want them to get burnt out at an
Yeah.
early age and then quit. And we're kind of fighting that fine line every single day.
I'm actually curious, when did it emerge, just like for you and your brother, that you guys were obviously superstar football athletes, and like when did you specialize there? Just because back to that same question of like, and obviously there is the talent aspect, but I also believe, and maybe this is incorrect, that if the talent is there, even if you start at 6 years old or 8 years old, like
Right.
it's going to be there.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious for you.
I think first off, each sport is a little different on the commitment and when you have to get started based on what
Yeah.
the specialty is and what the requirements are. And with football, you can start a lot later. Quarterback position, you might have to start a little earlier, but it was still, in my senior year in high school, I played basketball.
Wow.
I played baseball up until my junior year, and so it was very late for me to specialize and say, really college is when I say, all right, I'm only playing football now. And I think I worked harder at football than the other sports, but
Yeah.
I still played them. And I think,
Yeah.
kids can do that. Like you can say,
Yeah.
hey, I want to go play college lacrosse, but I still like playing basketball. I'm going to play on my high school basketball team just for fun. And I
Yeah,
might
love
not
that.
grind at it and do every travel league, but you can still play that, and that is an option. I think that people can pursue.
Yeah.
Okay, last question for you, and
Yep.
then I promise we'll let you go, because I know you have
Having
lots of
fun.
different things that
Having
you need to
fun.
do today. But getting into the investing side, when did you develop that passion and how did you get up that curve? We talk about this all the time, that increasingly I think people are coming to different phases in their investing careers
Sure.
later in life, right? So we talked about having to specialize physically as an athlete, but I think people are specializing academically and intellectually so much earlier too.
Right.
So when did that shift happen for you and how did you navigate that?
Well, it's really happened once I retired from playing football. I
Uh-huh.
always had an interest in it, always had an interest in business and kind of connecting people and open doors and getting involved. But I always came back to the fact that as a professional athlete, I only had so much time to play this sport and to play this game and to do it at a high level. And if I wasn't giving 100% of that commitment to that sport, it was going to take away and I would be doing this other business
Yeah.
thing maybe before I really wanted to.
Uh-huh.
And so when I retired, that's when I really dove into it and met with a lot of people, sat in a lot of different meetings and tried to figure out, what my passion is. Where do I want to spend time? Where can I make an impact and help out? And so it's been fun. It's been a journey, and I think I'm still at the beginning stage of it. I don't know
As are we all.
exactly
Yes.
what I'm doing sometimes. That's why I come to these events
Yeah.
and learn from people, have great conversations, and every day is an opportunity to get better, make improvements. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to say the wrong things, and just kind of as an athlete, you learn from it. I like being coached. If I tell people I work with, if I say the wrong thing or that's not accurate, tell me I'm wrong and I'll fix it. But if you don't tell me, I'm going to keep doing the same incorrect thing.
Yeah, oh, I love that. Well, is there anyone here or are there any mentors in the investing world that you really look up to?
Oh man, there's so many people that I guess, looking at the list here today, I just saw Shaq. I don't know if that's like my mentor in the investing world, but
Love it.
but you see how Shaq has got involved, and he's used his brand, and he's bought into ownership in companies, and just like you're doing endorsements for companies now, you're buying into it and you're endorsing it also. You can help make a real impact on the inside of learning. So he's been unbelievable personality, and set the example for a lot of other athletes coming up the ranks.
That's so awesome.
So cool. Well, listen, thank you
you.
so
Thank you.
much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We really
Thank you.
appreciate
Congrats
it.
on
lot
all
of
your
fun.
success.
Thanks so much.
All right, let's do this. So, following up on our conversation with Eli Manning, where we were talking about sports and investing, we are here to talk about the intersection of sports, real estate, and investing. So, we are joined by David Adelman, who has so much going on. David, tell us what you're most excited about right now.
We're doing a lot of things. I mean, so, I'm involved in the Sixers, the New Jersey Devils, Crystal Palace. So, owning professional sports teams is fun, but we're also working on building a world-class arena in downtown Philadelphia.
Nice.
So the goal is to create a building where we can really give fans a world-class experience. It's going to be open in 2031. Create like a pre-game environment outside, great fan experience, premium experience inside, and then post-game give them someplace to go out to eat, and create a whole journey for people going to a game.
And so this is going to be for basketball?
Basketball and hockey. We're partnering
Okay.
with the Flyers and Comcast to do something really great. About $1.5 billion to spend. It's going to be a really fun project for the city of Philadelphia.
I think it's so interesting thinking about the intersection of sports investing and also kind of urban planning, right? And the development of a city. Are you guys doing a social district around it? Is there any kind of redistricting involved? Because I know that there's so much that's key to the success of these kind of ventures.
So it's interesting. So we just announced, originally we were going to put our arena in downtown Philadelphia. And we just came together with Comcast to keep it at the sports district. So Philadelphia is very unique. We're all 4 professional sports teams play in one place. All the stadiums are there. And the goal now is to create a really vibrant mixed-use environment around the stadiums instead of a sea of parking lots. Apartments, retail, hotel, energy. And so I think you need that to kind of create life and vibrancy to make it kind of active pre- and post-game.
And so are you also then involved in the investments in the infrastructure around, it
Yes.
sounds like, as well as the stadium itself?
That's correct.
Okay, that's so cool.
And what do you think about kind of the commercial real estate environment writ large in the current world that we live in? I feel like it's been like a running joke, right? Like, what's going to happen to commercial real estate? Like, is the bottom going to fall out? What's going to change? What do you see as like the shifting dynamics in these urban environments that may potentially turn the tide, if at all?
Well, the number one thing, and you're really referring to office buildings,
Yeah.
right? And get people back to work,
Yeah.
right? And I think if you get people back in the office, remind them that talking to people, not behind a screen, but
Yeah,
interacting and
yeah.
having real conversation
Yes.
will get people to fill these buildings.
Yep.
Some of them are going to be slated for conversion. They're just too old to be kind of Class C office buildings, aren't going to make it.
Yep.
So you'll see some of them change.
Is the dream of commercial into real estate going to happen? Is it are
Into
there
residential?
too many hurdles? Yeah. What did I say?
Commercial.
into
You
real
meant
estate. I understood
conversion.
what you were saying.
Commercial
I was
into
just,
residential.
But we're all,
All good.
I'm picking up what you're putting down. We want to convert these buildings.
Yes.
I think what you're going to see is a lot of cities expedite the planning and design approval process
Uh-huh.
to allow for conversions.
Got
And
it.
so I do think that's going to pick up. I think eventually you'll see state and city tax credits to make that happen. And so I'm hearing a lot about that.
And I'm curious, so how much of the decision when you were thinking about, from an investment standpoint, to invest in the stadium was also driven, obviously, by the ownership in the Sixers? Because we were talking about sports investing and how, if you look at the NFL, it's like 80% is on the national level, whereas like baseball is like 20%. And so then there's so much is local, and basketball is somewhere in the middle. So is it like basically the investment sort of creates all these synergies with then obviously the ownership of the team? Is that something as you're making these investment decisions you're thinking about, or is this just like, I think this is going to be a great investment on the standalone basis and like independent of the team investment?
No, they're hand in glove. And so, for example, where we currently play, we're a tenant in the building.
Yeah.
So we don't control certain components of our fan experience.
Yep.
We don't capture certain revenues of the building because we're a tenant,
Yeah.
not an owner.
Yeah.
And so, the new deal that we cut, we're a 50-50 partner, so we can participate in those revenues. We can, create that retail in the ground floor of the buildings, the fan stores, the food, and all those things, and participate in that. And I do think all of those go into the pot when you're thinking about valuation.
So you were telling us the story earlier about how when you were coming up with the name of your family office fund, and it's Darko, and so we asked,
We asked a stupid millennial question. We were like, is that Donnie Darko?
Yeah.
Because that's what we assume.
Yes.
Because we're morons.
So I would love your view on naming, how you came up with that, and then just like like naming things in general? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think as I transitioned from real estate to private equity to kind of investing on behalf of my family, I was like, I don't know, Adelman Capital is kind of boring and probably a little weird, right? And, some people do that. And I was like, but I wanted something so that when people heard that we had invested, they're like, oh, so Darko's an investor. What kind of value do they bring? What's the value proposition when they have options to get investment from other people? And so, you asked me where the name came from. I'm like, I need a really cool name. I need something that people are going to remember. And I was like, crickets. I couldn't think of anything, right? I'm like, I'm doing it. And then one day, literally, I'm like, well, I don't want to do Adelman. I don't want to do this. But so Darko really came to bear from David Adelman Realty Capital.
yeah.
And then I kind of drew the initials, and I was like, "Oh my God, I've got a name that's
I
kind of
love it.
cool, right?
Yeah.
It's catchy." And so,
Yeah.
So Darko's been around probably 15 years, and we're in everything from early stage venture capital, fintech, a lot of consumer products. Because my day job is a company called Campus Apartments, where I house about 25,000 college students.
Oh.
And so I would always get approached by consumer brands
Yeah.
to say, "Hey, could we try this out at your properties? Could we do that?" So we do a fair amount of consumer as well.
Okay, last question. Being so in touch with kind of young people, because that's obviously the tenants in
Yes.
college apartments, so much of our audience is young college students who are thinking about coming up into the world of either investing or being somehow involved with everything that's going on here. If you had one piece of advice to give those young people who are thinking about starting a career in finance or investing, what would it be?
I give the same advice consistently. Is your personal brand, your reputation. You get one reputation.
Yeah.
And that is your most prized possession and treasured asset. And so that comes to bear about integrity, honesty. When you're interviewing, be honest about what you're looking for. Don't play games with different people. And it starts there. But I say to young college kids, your brand is your power, right? And so if you can do something to really protect that, people know you're of high integrity. They know you're going to work hard. They're going to follow you and listen to you. To me, that's it. Just, be honest with people.
I love that. David, this was such a pleasure.
Great.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for taking
And
the time.
congratulations on all your
Good
success.
stuff. All right,
I know you're
thanks.
going to have season ticket holders in all hearts.
Yeah, please. We need it. All right, we'll take all we can get.
I mean, my husband is a Phillies born and raised.
All right, tell him to come
and-
visit us.
Yeah.
We'll take good care of him. Okay.
Awesome.
All right,
Thank you
thanks.
so
Thanks for
much.
the time. I appreciate it.
Got
All
it?
right.